Hi, it's winter in Finland. Time for an RPG topic, and I'm really hoping to get some replies to this, whether just text or video. RPGs and mental health, or rather mental illness. Now this is a bit touchy for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's very serious. I mean, I know there have been videos. I think the Gentleman Gamer did one with was it Andre, with about violence and rape and how to handle those serious situations in a role-playing game, should they even be there. And this is another tricky one, but I haven't found a video about this yet. First of all, RPGs, mental health, why have it? That is, why even deal with it? Now, it's not just to simulate a horror movie. I think this is the main reason, is to add to the tension, make the players care about more than just hit points. I mean, yeah, their characters might survive, but do they even want to survive at that point? Are they so broken mentally that for their damaged minds, death would actually be a better alternative than continuing to live on like they are? I think it absolutely has a point in certain games, mainly horror games, because those deal with the kind of themes where stuff like stress usually comes up, and actually I think should come up, and often. But yeah, it's about a shock to the system that is not visible. Now, at the end of the day, trauma to the body can be horrifying. I know someone who lives with considerable pain, and they have to deal with that probably for the rest of their lives. That's absolutely horrible. And that's bad enough. But it's another thing entirely to start losing your faculties, and the reason is because this leads to crippling self-doubt, because you can't really trust yourself anymore, depending on the stress and the kind of mental illness that the person is experiencing. Of course, I'm no expert. I've only read a couple of books on the subject and talked with my friends about this a couple of times. I don't know anyone with a serious mental illness, I don't think. Like I said before, it's hard to tell because usually there's no visible thing to observe, like, oh, right. Because it's mostly about behavior and how that behavior changes. But yeah, when you start losing it and determining reality becomes more and more difficult, the person, whether they acknowledge it or not, they start to isolate themselves from whatever community surrounds them. Or worse yet, the community starts to shun this weirdo loner guy. And both of these later aspects can play hugely into a role-playing game. For example, Hunter the Vigil, where the rules book itself goes into very deep explanations on the type of people that these hunters are. These people who hold up the vigil, that is, torch up against the Black Knight to guard the general population from all kinds of threats. These people may start out their hunter careers, as they are, quite normal. Let's say there's a shop teacher, yeah, he's like educating the youth of the town, and on some nights he goes out with his buddies looking for the guy that ate his wife, and when they find it, they're gonna kill it. So that guy might start out bent on revenge, but still pretty normal, in pain from his loss, but still normal. And he's hoping to deal with it by killing the monster. Of course, makes sense. Might actually work. He doesn't know. He has to try. But when they kill that first monster, there will be all kinds of emotions. Possibly the monster does something clearly supernatural, you know, uses telekinesis, mind control, whatever weird stuff. And all this stuff piles up on him. He could very well just soldier through it, and it's okay. Yeah, that was truly horrific, but it's over now. But next week there is news of a different monster, and slowly but surely they start isolating themselves from the normals, the people who don't know that these things even exist. So he might start losing sleep, he might be late to work, he might start drinking or self-medicating in other ways, and slowly but surely, at some point, there will be enough emotional trauma that he will break in some way. Now, the guy or girl that is losing it may very well not be aware of it. The character, that is. The player absolutely should be, but the character's perception of the world may not seem to change at all. Like someone suffering from severe depression, they don't think they see the world any different than anyone else, unless they actually talk to someone about it and start unraveling what's going on inside their heads. And furthermore, in a game like Hunter, and I would say also other horror role-playing games like Call of Cthulhu, Unknown Armies, I'll go into these later and how they handle this, but there's also this thing called shared experience. And when you share extreme experiences, something supernatural, something very violent, these events tie people together in ways that are unlike any other in the world. I mean, guys that have been real human beings who have been to horrible war zones and they've served a tour of duty over there, they have a bond to the people they come home with that cannot be clearly understood by an outsider. If they've experienced something really harrowing over there. Some people, thank God, come back home and they're okay. Nothing really bad happened to them. I'm sure they were under stress and everything, but nothing really scarred them emotionally. But yeah, I would say that when handling this mental health and mental illness, the players, just like discussing the amount of violence in the game before the game even starts. Like I always do this when I start gaming, even if it's with the same group that I've been running games for years. I ask them always before I start the game, is it okay if I put this element in here? How much violence is okay? I don't want to introduce a child molester into a story, even if he's there for a good reason and everything. Okay, there's a reason he would be there. There would be interesting interaction and absolutely an interesting conflict. But if someone is uncomfortable with it, it shouldn't be there. You as a game master can adapt. You can say, okay, just an idea, I understand, let's go somewhere else with this. With mental illness, you really have to ask, is it okay to introduce this, or rather handle this in the game? Now some games presuppose that of course it's going to be in there, like Call of Cthulhu and Unknown Armies, and even World of Darkness, which I just reviewed. But you should still ask, because if someone has a problem, then you should first off talk about it, and second, if it can be resolved, think about a different game. Of course, if it's just that one player, then he or she might have to sit this one out. That's okay too. If you're all friends, that's okay. But before you start, the players, they need to be adults about it. It's not like just a wound, or because it says schizophrenic here on my character sheet now, it means that I can do whatever I want or act crazy, right? I mean, and schizophrenia is one of the most misunderstood of mental illnesses, I think. But yeah, they should be adult about it, like understand that this is heavy. And furthermore, they should understand the mental health rules. So how they can protect themselves from mental stress, what actions they can take to prevent it, and what actions they can do afterwards when it has happened. They need to know this beforehand, so that they know what the feel of the game is and the game world. And this is the most important thing about the players when it comes to mental illness. Players have to be willing to show weakness. They have to be willing to roleplay out the effects of their character starting to crack and possibly finally breaking. And this is by far the biggest hurdle I've seen in role-playing games, because players usually want to be the tough guy. And oh no, werewolf charges at me and tears out my friend's spinal column as he's approaching, and blood goes flying everywhere, and I'm trapped in this elevator and he's coming. Yeah, an extreme example in combat, no less. But you know what I'm getting at. It should be okay for that grizzled combat veteran to go into a panic. Maybe into a frenzy where he just starts firing blindly. Or he freezes. It's okay. In a game with mental health and mental illness, these things happen, and it might make for a better story. even for your character, even if they die. You have to be willing to show weakness. And this is even more important when it comes to stuff that's outside the combat. Like if they lose their friends, another player's character dies, and even if it's not role played out all the time, it is assumed that there's some kind of a bond there. Usually. Even if it's an antagonistic bond, like, oh god, I really hated that guy, but now that he's gone, I have no one to harass, no one to talk shit to, or shit at, whatever it is. It's important to remember these aspects when things start to go awry mentally, because it's not like someone throws a switch and oh now you're crazy. No, it's subtle, it's over a time period, it's a progress. And as for the game master, first I would say don't let the game turn into Crazy's the RPG, unless that's what you're going for. Make sure that it's not a game about mental illness. No matter how good the dementation or whatever rules are, the game shouldn't be about that. It should be just an aspect of the game and an aspect of the rules, but it shouldn't be what the game is about. You need to have a plot and a clearly defined game world. And when someone does go crazy, even if it's just temporary insanity, you should play through it, but don't constantly focus on it. If there are 6 players and 2 of them have characters that have severe mental illness, although it might be tempting, don't constantly zero in on those 2 characters and those flaws that they now have. You can bring it up when they are doing something, but don't constantly go at them, because that creates an atmosphere of animosity. It becomes a very players versus GM at that point. It can become, at least. I've seen it happen. And the most important thing, like players having to show weakness, the GM has to give guidelines and descriptions on the mental issue, but they have to let the players do the rest. This is their character. This is the only thing they have agency in their entire game. They don't control the dice, they don't control the plot, they don't control what goes on around them, they just have their character. If you take that away from them, even under the guise of mental illness, like a split personality, you take away their fun. They're not going to be interested in listening to you talk on their behalf. Let them describe stuff, let them play it out, and if they're showing like they're going into a wrong direction with it, like they've maybe misunderstood it, nudge them back. But do not take control of their character under any situation, no matter how severe the mental breakdown might be. Now, I've made up some notes here about some of the games that have rules for mental health, and these are just the games that I own physical copies of. But how they handle it and why I think they work and the way they don't work. First, Call of Cthulhu. A lot of people know this game and love it, but yeah, it's very simple system. It's inaccurate, it's simplified to the point of laughability, but it works due to the one-shot nature of Call of Cthulhu game. Usually you don't run the same character for a period of time, a long arc. I mean, yes, there are those like Masks of Nyarlathotep, they're like long adventures, but those are the exception, not the rule. And so here the sanity system works. I referenced this in one of my earlier videos, but here it's like a fuel gauge. It depletes, and when it hits 0, that's it. You're insane permanently. There's also temporary insanity in Call of Cthulhu, which works really well. But here the game is not just about the horror of some monster from beyond time and space. It's also about the horror of going insane, because it can happen very fast. It's not a long progress over a time thing. You see these, well, in most cases, like ancient things, threats, and that's it. You flip out. It works okay in Call of Cthulhu. It's not bad, but I for one prefer something way deeper if you actually want to make it an important part of the game, an essential part of the rules. Call of Cthulhu has a very nice list of different phobias, although the new 6th edition that I own. The chapter is very good, and it makes it clear how serious mental illness is, and states that there's no way to really accurately describe it, so that this is just a simplified thing, and it's okay. And World of Darkness, it has also very simplified mechanics, but it's very evocative. Like the different mental illnesses in there, they have like different point values, and or rather like they start with like you get something that's like a mild phobia, and then it goes into a severe phobia, and yeah, it's pretty interesting. They describe the different conditions well, and I would say that maybe it could use some better, like the way you get those different phobias and everything, it's a bit too easy, maybe. Just like Call of Cthulhu, where you see the horror and you just go crazy. World of Darkness is not really a one-shot oriented game, so, and it's incredibly tough to get rid of those mental illnesses in World of Darkness. So I would not recommend maybe using the rules as they are, like making it just a bit more lenient to the players so that they don't just break instantly. I've seen that happen too, like it's pretty easy. And finally, the game that has, I think, the best mental health system I've ever seen, Unknown Armies. It certainly has the most realistic description, the system that I've ever seen, because it's an actual progression. It's not just an on-off switch where you're normal or you're crazy. There are several stress meters that fill up, and these are the different aspects of the mind. There's like violence, unnatural, helplessness, self. I think I left one out. Isolation. Yeah, that's it. And yeah, it's an excellent system because there are clearly defined changes in behavior for each point on those charts, and it also shows that an individual can get hardened to certain things, like violence. A guy who has been on the war zone for several years might have several hardened notches, so that when people start shooting at him, there is no way that he's going to panic. No way. Just from shooting. Now if someone starts torturing him, or he has to torture someone else, then you might make a violent stress check. But those lesser threats to his violence stress meter no longer count for nothing or anything. And because it's so varied, it means that different people can break in different ways, depending on just sheer luck or what they encounter. And there's no like real what would you call it, a resistance attribute to it. Everyone is pretty much equal when it comes to mental health. Everyone starts at the same point and goes from there. Although they give the possibility in the game to have some hardened notches ready, so that, for example, if your guy is a loner, he might have 3 hardened notches in isolation. And, I mean, he's okay living by himself. If he doesn't have human contact in a couple of weeks, he's not going to cry about it. So it gives a little added customization as well. Now, aside from all these rules, there's one final thing: how to get better. All rules should offer ways to alleviate all these different conditions. Now, whether that's some different forms of therapy, a drug regimen, counseling, there should be something to put the character on the right path again mentally. It could be time consuming, most definitely is, if you're going for realism at all. But if it's time consuming and necessary, it's okay, because I mean, most games that I've run are like, they span several years in game time. So if one adventure starts in the summer and one guy's character goes completely off the rails and they have to put him in an institution, the next adventure or investigation could start in the winter. So it gives him 6 months to recuperate, and it might only take him 2 or 3 months, but you know, he has some time to unwind, get his head straight. However, one thing I would definitely advise against is no magic pills. There should not be any quick way, like, oh yeah, just 2 hours of electroshock and he's okay. No, this dilutes the threat and makes mental health seem like just another hit point meter. And it's probably the worst thing you could do in a horror game, or well, any game really, like take the thing that was intended for one thing and turn it into another, or just make it not count. So yeah, recuperation should have value, and it should be important, and it could also offer up some interesting role-playing experiences. I mean, an entire session, role-playing session, could take place in an insane asylum or a hospital for the criminally insane, depending on how things go, what the character is like, what is done. I mean, they could, it's wouldn't have to be like you know, hug it out group discussion, but it could be interesting visiting someone and seeing like, yeah, that could be me right there, aren't I lucky? And then knowing that someday you will have to come back to that institution and possibly ask this guy for help. Is he going to be ready for it? All this kind of stuff. It's very interesting, and it's, I think, definitely worth considering, especially in a game that runs for a long period of time. So that's about that. Yeah, some questions at the end here. I wrote this down so that I wouldn't forget after my long ramble. First question: have you seen mental illness being played exceptionally well or incredibly badly? Like someone who just didn't get it at all, or was trying to be way too funny about it, or someone that actually like maybe even surprised you at how in depth they went. Second question: what systems have you used to simulate these conditions, and how have they worked out for you? Your experiences on all different sorts of systems, please. Even these that I've just mentioned. It's very it's at the core of the issue, really. If the system is like weak or way too raw or undefined, you might have to make even your own systems. If you have, please let me know what they're like, how they work. And third, final question: which aspects do you view as the biggest hurdles for role-playing mental illness? Is it just that in your particular gaming group this might be viewed as, I don't know, boring, way too weird? Do you have some personal hang-ups? If you do, please respond. I'd be interested to know and continue the discussion. Yeah, that's about it, and thank you very much for watching. I hope to get some responses, and I'll see you another time. Yeah, thanks, bye.